My name is Bill Hayduk. I'm currently living in Wadsworth, Ohio. I started my career out of Johnstown, Pennsylvania at the age of 18, having been a lover of aircraft, model builder, and wanting to fly so bad I could taste it. As soon as I reached the age of 18, the war had been in effect a little over a year. I tried to enlist, and I had a rash on my hands, and the recruiting officer told me to come back when that was gone. So 2 months after I was 18, I went, took my cadet exam and my physical, passed it, and was sworn in as a aviation cadet. 3 months later, I was called up for active duty and got sent to heaven. I went out of a severe winter storm in Pennsylvania to Miami Beach, where it was 83 degrees and all the beautiful girls on the beach. I thought I really went to heaven. We stayed there 1 month in a hotel, and all we did was march around the streets of Miami Beach. Did a little bit of practice with a rifle out on a rifle range, and then we got sent to colleges scattered all over the United States. It was called a college training detachment. I got sent to Springfield, Ohio, March of 43, and was there for 2 months. I got 7 hours in a Piper Cub, didn't get the solo, which was a requirement for all these cadets that were at the school. We did a lot of studying about physics, aircraft flying, regulations, just a lot of college work. From there, in May, I got sent to San Antonio, Texas, to the Cadet Classification Center. We spent approximately a month taking all kinds of verbal, written, psychomotor tests. They were deciding whether you would be a pilot, a navigator, or a bombardier. And after you did all these tests and they reviewed everything, they started to put the names up on the board as to what your assignment would be. So towards the end of May, we're all looking for our assignments, and most of the guys, except for about 10 of us, had their assignments. And the 10 of us, week, 2 weeks, still didn't get them. We tried to figure out what we had in common, why we weren't being classified. Well, we found out we were either Italian, German, or Austro-Hungarian. We were Axis family oriented, and they were running a check on us in our neighborhoods, which I found out later. They talked to half the people in our neighborhoods. Finally, we got our assignments, and I was assigned pilot training. From there, we went over to pre-flight, and we spent June and July, rather about July and August, in pre-flight, and there it was just nothing but study, 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 and 2 hours of physical education every day. We got 12 hours a week off, and they got you prepared to get in an airplane. And there I went to El Reno, Oklahoma, and started to fly the PT-19. I soloed it in my first 7 hours and loved the airplane. Was just a terrific, do anything with it. Snap roll it, loop it, slow roll it, loved it. We got about 60 hours and you got a check ride every 20 hours. The check ride was usually an hour and the Army instructor would write you out. We had civilian instructors in primary. Then we went to basic training where I flew the BT-13, which was another great airplane. I just loved every airplane I flew. And I can remember I had 5 hours in it. I'm solo, and I wanted to loop it. And I got it up in the top of the loop, and I forgot to release back pressure, and I had it stalled upside down, going down, and they called it the faulty vibrator. And that old cowling was just vibrating. And I finally remembered my instructor telling me, turn her loose, it'll fly. And it did. But basic, we learned to fly some instruments, night flying, and this is the truth. The night flying I did, I made one landing, never touched the controls. The instructor was flying. It was a bad night. Wind was blowing hard, and we made 3 landings. I did land it twice. And then he said, take this from the auxiliary field we were flying in, and he said, take it back to the base. My first time out at night, I got to fly cross country. I found the base, and I got vertigo. I got disoriented. And I said, I got to go out and get organized. And finally did, came in and landed it. And had a great time in basic. And from there, we were assigned to single engines or to twin engines for advanced training. So based on your performance in basic, you either went to singles or multi. I got assigned singles. And I went to Victoria, Texas, and 2 months there, I flew the T6, and I ended up getting about 10 hours in a P40. And in March 1944, I got my wings in commission and was sent to Richmond, Virginia. And there I got to fly the airplane I really loved, the P-47. And we were at 2 bases, one where we learned to fly it, and the second base was out at Dover, Delaware, where we used to go out over the Atlantic to practice our high altitude gunnery, medium altitude gunnery, shooting out over the ocean. And we finished that up early July. And July 15th, I got on a ship and headed for Europe. I arrived at my squadron about the first week of August. And I saw my 20th birthday in my new fighter squadron. I was 19 when I hit the squadron. So I went boom, 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 right through the training program. The experience with the squadron we have P-38s, twin engines, and I had never flown a twin engine, nor had the other 7 guys that came in with me. So they put us into cockpits and blindfolded, you had to pass test to grab where the throttles were, mixture, all the instruments. You had to put your fingers on them. And when you successfully did that, they said, okay, take it, it's yours. And you just felt like, man, never flew a twin. And the guy pointed at your wings and he said, see that pair of wings? You fly anything the Air Force has. So we took off and flew them. I got about 15 hours in that, and we were short airplanes, we were short pilots, and trying to balance getting us trained and keep aircraft in combat. It took us almost the month of August, and I started flying combat early September. Flew my first mission. And my first mission, you flew with the squadron leader, and you stuck to him like glue. You just didn't separate, except on the dive bomb run. Now, the only instructions I got on a dive bomb run was, don't be afraid to shoot at them when you're going down. Fire your guns, which I did. Dropped my bombs, 4 500s, shooting all the way down. And man, I'm seeing all these red flashes down there, saying, boy, they're really raising hell. The guns, my guns. So when I landed, I reported what I saw. And the one guy said, those red flashes were their anti-aircraft shooting at you. That's when I learned what was happening. So that was my first mission. And my fourth mission, I was tail end Charlie now. I went from number 2 to number 4, which I felt was a nice move because you're moving up and you got to fly tail end Charlie for about 10 missions. So I'm tail end Charlie, and we took off. We went up through an overcast. Weather was bad, and there was a front moving from west to east, and green. I don't know too much about weather patterns. And we're at 27,000 feet, and I hear this whoomp, and my cockpit fills with smoke, flames coming out the right engine, and I immediately feathered it, cut the fuel to it, and called in and said, Card Sharp Leader, I'm on fire, I'm returning to base. And I heard him, and this is the last thing I heard on my radio. My leader, who was the element leader, was told to pick me up and take me home. And I saw him turn around. Now I've lost almost 10,000 feet because that airplane's not going to stay up there on one engine. And I'm calling him, telling him I'm below you. I'm immediately below you. I can see you. Got no response. And ultimately, I lost him. And now I've got about 600 miles to go home. I'm on one engine. I'm holding altitude at 14,000, and I'm probably pulling 35, 37 inches of mercury, about 2,400 RPM, carrying full right rudder, carrying the right wing up, and I flew her for 2 hours. And my prop governor started to go on my left engine. And in the meantime, I kept trying to call our homing station to give me a fix to the base. I don't have any idea where I am. I'm sitting on top of an overcast. And I could hear them giving steers to other guys. Nobody acknowledged me. I finally assumed that I had lost my transmitter right after I got hit. So finally got to the point, I'm sopping wet, flying this thing manually and working the prop on the left engine. It kept wanting to overspeed, and I finally said, it's time to go. And I started to slide out on the wing, and I forgot to unplug my headset. The radio had a pin that came up underneath. So I got back in, unplugged the radio, slid out on the wing, and as I tumbled through, my boot just ticked the elevator as I went down between the booms. And the chute opened, and I'm sitting in all white. And I hear this airplane above me, hear that engine whine and unwind. And pretty soon I hear this loud crash, and like 5 rounds of ammo went off. Dead silent. And while I'm hanging in that chute, it's all white, I see nothing. My first thought was, oh man, my mother's gonna get an MIA. And I don't know where I am. I know I'm not gonna be back to the base tonight. Well, still not knowing where I am, just before I hit the ground, I saw green and brown. And I didn't even have a chance to pull the shroud lines. It was that dense, the fog. And I'm in the mountains in western Yugoslavia, about 40 miles north of Sarajevo, in the mountains. And I wrote down as I left the airplane on my knee pad, 2:20. It was 20 after 2 in the afternoon when I went out. The next time I looked at my watch, it was almost quarter after 3. I hit the ground, and I must have been unconscious for about 20 to 30 minutes. After I came to, I said, not my back, God. I thought I had a broken back. And I laid there for probably another 20, 30 minutes till the pain subsided. And it finally did. And from there started another adventure. It was pouring rain, and I wanted a cigarette real bad. And I got myself against a tree, and was trying to light a cigarette. And here's a young boy with a rifle ready to take a shot at me. And I noticed his star on his hat. And I knew that was a Yugoslav partisan. And my background, as I said, was Austria-Hungarian, actually Slovak. And I understood the Slav language. I could understand Poles, Croatians fairly well. And in Slovak, I told this guy to wait. I'm an American. And I had my hands up. And he waited. And he told me to, can I prove it? And I opened my flight jacket to show him the Air Force patch on my shirt. And that kind of satisfied him. But he still was cautious. So finally he accepted me. And we talked a little bit. And he took me into this partisan camp we got in after dark. And there was a lieutenant in the Yugoslav partisans and a few soldiers there. And they had been celebrating a raid they made. And the first thing they did for me was pour me about 3 fingers of Slivovitz. And you know what Slivovitz is? Plum brandy. And in about 15 minutes, I'm feeling no pain. Life is good. And from there on out, those guys transported me. I figured I walked somewhere around 150 miles across the mountains on into a area where the British OSS would bring in aircraft to take us down flyers back to Italy. Now this is getting in the middle of October. We had a snowstorm in that mountain, in those mountains. And a very unique story. I'm like my 4th day, still way up in the mountains. We come into a pouring rain. We're sopping wet. 3 partisans, myself. We come onto this house and we just barge in. They have the burp guns. Nobody's going to fight us. So here's a big fire in the middle of the house with an iron kettle hanging from the roof with a bunch of pumpkin cooking in it. A woman with 2 little kids over on our right side, stalls with cows and some sheep in it. And the man wasn't in the house. And while we were sitting around the fire, drying out and warming up, he walked into the house. And he walked over to me and in perfect English said, "You're an American, aren't you?" I was shocked. I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Pennsylvania." He said, "Where in Pennsylvania?" I said, "Johnstown." He said, "I used to work in the coal mines in South Fork, which was 7 miles away from Johnstown. 7 miles. And then his next question, and this is funny, he said, "Are the whorehouses still open on Frankstown Road?" So help me. And I said, the last time I talked to the big boys, I said they were. And we left there, and then things started to get, they'd transfer me with different partisans. And we had water problems. We carried halogen pills to purify our water, but you don't have it for months. You purify maybe 3 or 4 bags of water, you're done. Well, between the lack of food and bad water, I ended up with dysentery. And I laid in the corner of a barn for 3 days, wrapped in part of a parachute, wanting to die. But I finally survived that, and we made it to this British OSS part. We also got involved in bringing an ammunition load into the area. I say we, my partisan support and me. And they brought this Russian airplane in 1 o'clock one morning, and there were 5 B-17 crew members. There was a British Spitfire pilot. One of my squadron mates that got shot down the day before I did bailed out 300 miles away from me. We met, I carried him on the airplane. He was that weak. And we came back into Italy that night. We also had 20 badly wounded Yugoslavs on that airplane. It was a load. And we took off on a grass strip, kerosene lanterns that light them. As soon as the airplane got airborne, they doused them. And I was in the hospital for 3 days, and then I hitchhiked back to my squadron. And walked into the squadron, nobody knew I was alive. And I shook them all up. So that was the extent of that trip. When you were traveling with those partisans, every night you found a different place to sleep. And this one night, we were in this little village called Yaitse, and this would have been around the 1st of October, 1944. I got put in with this Muslim family to sleep in their house, and they were supposed to feed me. And they gave me a bowl of bean soup that had beans in it and a slice of their black bread. That was my dinner, and I went to sleep. And after walking all day, I slept well, and they were supposed to get me up early that morning to join the munition train that was heading in for Sansky Most. Well, they forgot to wake me up. And this major in charge of the ammunition train sent a guy back to get me, and he came, got me, and there was an old man with a horse and wagon. Reminded me of my grandfather. He just looked like him. I thought it was him for a while. And this major took this old man, told him, take me and catch that wagon train. And he smacked the horse with a whip, and the horse took off. And the old man galloped that horse till we caught the wagon train, which had stopped at a little store, and I don't remember what I bought there, but I had the remains of $40 in my escape kit. This is gold sealed dollar bills, just like giving a person a gold uh, coin. Well, when I left that old man, I gave him 5 $1 bills. And he kissed my hand and he said, I can buy a new horse. That horse was about to die anyway. So we caught up with a wagon train and we went the rest of the day through this. As a matter of fact, I walked more than I rode the wagon over the rocks. It's hard riding. But we came upon the entrance into the town. There was a nice, gentle grade. It couple miles. And we had 2 women partisans, myself, and a man partisan riding this wagon. And the road was just ideal to let her fly. So the boy that's driving the horses just whips them, gets them going. They're picking up speed. We're going. Next thing you know, he's poking them in rear end with the whip. Tails are flying, and we're rolling. And came into town at about 30 miles an hour. That was quite a wild ride. And prior to that, we got trapped. Didn't get trapped. We got caught in a snowstorm. And there was a horse with us. And I wanted to ride that horse. I was freezing. I was in basically a summer outfit in the winter up in the mountains there. It was cold. And the guy that was riding the horse, the officer, put my hand on his tail. Hang on. The horse is going to pull you. And that's how we got over the mountain, me hanging on to the horse's tail. He wouldn't let me ride it. He said you'd freeze to death. So that was another step of the journey. Finally, as I said, we got out of there with 5 Americans from a bomb crew, a P-51 pilot, a Spitfire pilot, my squadron mate, and we flew back to Italy. Now, one of the worst parts of the whole trip was the lice. I looked like a pincushion from lice eating all over my body. And the first thing they did to us in Italy was delouse us with DDT. And then you got a shower. And from there, it was recouping a hospital for 3 days and headed back to the squadron. And They had got orders sending us, the two of us, back to the States that were dated October 21st, 1944. And the group that went back got into New York in November of 44, but the two of us decided we would stay on and fly with a squadron. We wouldn't go back. So we stayed on, and both of us completed our tours. And I left Italy. I flew my last mission April, I think it was 23, 1945. And I was waiting to get on a ship in Naples when the Germans surrendered. And from there on, it was on the ship, 21 days back to the States. I arrived June 12th in New York City, looking at the city all night, sitting on that boat, and got home June 14th, 1945 for leave. So that's pretty much my military career. After that, it was just mopping up. This was one of the finest, sweetest flying airplanes you'd ever want to fly. It was just so responsive, you couldn't help but love it. I did some gunnery with this off Matagorda Island, got to shoot the 30 caliber machine gun off the nose, which I'm not sure everybody got to do with T6s. However, while I was there, I got pneumonia, and I was put in the hospital, and I said, "Oh, I won't graduate with my class." But the doctor put me on sulfa, and it wiped out that pneumonia in 3 days. And this was just when we were ready to graduate. And I needed 5 hours to complete my course to get my wings. So the last day, I'm trying to get 5 hours in before noon to graduate with my class. And I managed to get the 5 hours in, but the last plane I took up, I decided I'm going to really have fun. I was doing acrobatics for about a half hour, and I rolled the thing, or I looped it. And as I was in the loop, I had forgotten to tighten the seat belt. And I ended up laying in the canopy upside down. So I'm trying to figure out how to get the airplane back in flying shape. I'm kicking a stick with my feet, trying to get the aileron to move it. And finally it righted itself, and I put the seat belt on, came in and landed, had my 5 hours. I'm running back to the barracks as our flying class in their officer uniforms was going to the theater to get their wings. And I got in just in time as the ceremony started, and I got my wings March 14th, 1944. That was my last ride in a T6. I take that back. I've ridden in a T6 since, but that was my last training flight. During the trip through Yugoslavia and bringing that load of ammunition, the major that was in charge of that wagon train was going to come into his hometown that afternoon. He hadn't been home for over 4 years, fighting the Germans all over Yugoslavia. His, he sent word ahead to let his parents know that he was going to be there that afternoon and that he was bringing an American shot down pilot with him. So we finally got to his home, and you can imagine the joy that mother with her son, who she hadn't seen for 4 years. She had prepared one of his favorite dishes, which was fried cabbage, and in this case, white noodles. And that was something I used to love as a kid at home. My grandmother and my mother both made fried cabbage and noodles every couple weeks. Well, we had this dish pan full of this fried cabbage and noodles, and I mean a dish pan. It was big. And the mother set the dish pan on the floor in the middle of the house, and the major sat on one side, I sat on the other side. She gave each of us a spoon and a hunk of bread, and it was he who eats the fastest gets the most. We emptied that dish pan, wiped it clean, and man, I was absolutely stuffed. Needless to say, not having eaten much in 5 days, I overate, and I did get awfully sick that night. But I sure enjoyed that cabbage and noodles while I was chewing on it. And I'd like to go and talk a little bit about some of my flights, especially a couple that I'll never forget as long as I live. One was a high level called a droop snoot bombing mission, where we had a P-38 with a bomb sight in it. And everybody would fly real tight formation, wingtip to wingtip, on that P-38 with a bomb sight on it. And on this particular mission, we were to high-level bomb a bridge from 12,000 feet. We each had 500-pound bombs on the aircraft, and our squadron went over the bridge, but cloud cover obscured the bridge, and we were not able to drop our bombs. So the bombardier kept the pilot flying till he could get some kind of an approach to the bridge, and after about a half hour, we're down to 2,000 feet. We're flying up the river, still in this tightly packed formation. If one bomb would have gone off, 16 P-38s would have disappeared. But we're up the river, heading towards the bridge at 2,000 feet, 180 mile an hour, and the Germans, being methodical, read the book P-38, 220 mile an hour. They overled us with their anti-aircraft fire. We could see the tracers coming up at us and go over us and behind us. And at that point, the bombardier comes over the radio, arm your bombs, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bombs away. 16 P-38s go off into a cloud burst. We went off in all directions to get out of that anti-aircraft fire, and all we did was build a dam in the middle of the river. We missed the bridge by almost 2 miles. One of my other missions was where we tangled with some 109s, and just prior to our going down to strafe a train, I spotted about 12 109s coming in at us from our right. And I called my flight leader and told him to brake left, duck, we've got bandits going under us. And as we broke, I finally got my gun sights on one of them, and I must have fired 4 separate short bursts and finally got hits in his left wing root. And about the time I started to hit the 109, anti-aircraft fire here again was absolutely vicious. It came up between Duckwitz and myself, and Duck broke to the right and I broke to the left. And the next thing I know, I'm at housetop level going over Linz, Austria, right smack dab on the roofs. Saw a church steeple down the road, made a hard right turn around the church steeple because I had to head back south. We have 600 miles to go home. So I headed around to the south. I kept looking for my wingman, who I never did see again. He got shot down that day, and one of the boys in another flight said they saw the flaming P-38 as it was rolling on the ground. So my wingman got killed that day. That was one of the tougher missions. We were a little late getting back that day and almost ran out of gas. We landed at an island that the British held and refueled there and made it on back to the base. Those were some of the flying experiences that I had. I flew many dive bombing missions, escorted bombers to the targets, from the targets, and basically did everything every other fighter did. When I was getting out of the service, the officer that was in charge of taking care of all my records and making sure all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed made a comment that we're going to get you your pension. And I said, what pension? He says, well, according to your records, you got a pretty good pension coming. And I said, no, I don't. I'm fine. I have no problems. Just get me out. I don't need a pension. And he said, you're nuts. You earned this. I said, no, I'm fine. I have no problems. Well, I didn't take the pension. And 20 years later, when I was going to start my business, I was taking a physical from my family doctor, and I told him I wanted a real good physical because I'm starting my own business and I want to make sure I can hack it. And during this physical, he made the comment, he said, boy, you had a real good back injury. When did you get that? I said, the day I bailed out. He said, and you flew with it afterwards? I said, yes, I did. He said, you were lucky. So I feel I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm here talking to you. On one of my bomber escort missions, we were escorting B-24s up to Bratislava, Czechoslovakia. They were bombing a marshalling yard up there, and the anti-aircraft fire was pretty severe. Years later, I talked to one of the gunners that was there on that mission. He remembered it. This is a Slovak gunner, and he said they had something like 700 guns around there that day firing at our bombers. Well, one of the 24s that was pretty close to me where I was flying cover had an engine feathered and another one smoking. And I immediately decided that he's not going to make it back with the group, the bomb group. I'll pick him up and make sure he's protected all the way back. So I called the squadron leader in, gave him my call sign, told him I'm bringing a crippled B-24 back. I'll be late. So I started to slide up to the B-24, tried to raise him on the radio, but I got no response out of him. And then I decided I'd fly alongside him, give him an okay sign that I'd be with him. As I was sliding up to him, I noticed the left waist gun blinking. The guy was shooting at me, and I can understand they were pretty scared in that airplane. So I slid out, waved my booms, came back in slowly, kept watching that left waist gun, finally decided I was all right. I went in alongside the 24, gave him an okay sign, I'm with you, and my wingman and I got above him a little bit, and he headed on course for our bases in Foggia. I checked his heading. He had a good heading for the base. So my wingman and I, for the next half hour, just did S-turns over this B-24 that's probably flying at 140, 150 mile an hour on two engines, and we're down to about 12,000 feet. We're just probably coming into Yugoslavia from Austria when I noticed a single aircraft coming up from the south. Now at that time, the Germans would come up with some of our captured airplanes and shoot our airplanes down. So I was a little leery about this aircraft. I didn't know what it was for a while. Finally decided it is a B-24 coming up from the south, opposite direction. So I called him and asked him for the call sign of the day, which he gave me, and I accepted it, and I told him to turn to the south, coming with us alongside the other B-24. I wanted him off his right wing so he couldn't shoot him down, and I could get a shot at him if I had to. About that time, I noticed that we were coming into an area that had anti-aircraft fire, and about that time, the anti-aircraft fire started on that crippled B-24. I was probably 200 yards away from him at the time. I did a diving pass across his nose to follow me to get out of the flak. He made an opposite turn, and I came around. By that time, he had been hit pretty hard with that anti-aircraft fire, and I started to count parachutes coming out of the airplane. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They're all out. The B-24 at that point was falling like a maple leaf. He was probably at 5,000, 4,000 feet. And the wingtip of that B-24 caught the parachute of that number 10th guy, and it went on in and crashed with him dragging in that parachute. Not a very pleasant sight. And I didn't bring my 24 back. I was a little unhappy with that other B-24 for distracting me from doing my job. The aircraft that came back to look for him, we picked him up and started escorting him back, and finally, our fuel running low, I told him I would have to leave him, and about that time we had hit the coast of the Adriatic, and we left him and headed on our course for home, and our cruise speed was 30, 40 mile an hour faster than his. The next thing I hear is him trying to get a steer from our homing station and getting no response after 4 or 5 tries. I called him on the radio and I gave him a heading that would put him on the spur of Italy. And he said, "Thanks, little friend. Appreciate that." So that's how that particular mission ended. We got back about an hour after the rest of the crew had landed. As I told you previously, 8 P-47 pilots came into the 95th Fighter Squadron at the same time. And I told you how we had to pass the blindfold check before we could fly the P-38. Within 2 weeks of being there, our first of the 8 guys got killed in the piggyback. They took him up for a piggyback ride, and they had a malfunction that caused the piggyback to crash, and the 2 boys in the piggyback died. About a month later, we're on a mission, and this mission is something else. Not many people know about it. That day shot down 3 Russian yaks. We destroyed over 150 Russian trucks and ammunition carriers. We killed a number of Russian soldiers, all due to a intelligence error. There were 2 valleys coming up out of Yugoslavia, and one valley was filled with Germans coming up out of Greece. The other one was filled with Russians trying to cut them off. Weather was bad. The colonel overshot the German valley, ended up in this valley filled with Russians, and according to our intelligence, there they were, fair game, but they thought they were Germans. And the fighting started right now. The low squadrons started strafing. The high squadrons saw some MiGs, some yaks, take off from a field, and immediately a battle ensued. And my 2 tent mates were flying that day, Coulson and Brewer, and both of them were shot down and killed that day by the Russians. My tent mate Bloomer shot down a yak. My tent mate Bowers, who was shooting at a yak, had 4 out of his 5 guns jammed. He only had 1 gun firing. He didn't do too well, but he did hit the yaks. Our CO of that mission was ordered back to the States that night, and I understand the Russians wanted him executed for not doing his job. And the Russian general, my understanding is that he was executed. The Russians didn't play around. I now am just barely getting through, started into combat, and I have 3 of my 8 guys already dead. I'm the next one to go down, so that's 4 out of 8 of us that have gone down. And one of our friends on his very last mission, Lieutenant Carr, had to crash land in Yugoslavia. He got shot down. So out of 8 guys, 5 out of 8 got shot down that gives you an idea of what we were facing. Three of us are still alive, and Duckwitz is in Dubuque, Iowa, Illinois, and Bloomer is in Manchester, Iowa. We still talk to each other and we haven't seen each other for 2 years now, but we do stay together. That pretty much covers what happened to 8 replacement fighter pilots that came into the 95th Fighter Squadron at that particular time.